we are a church that loves our city. Amen? Excellent. We love Canterbury, and that's why we have started a series. That's going to catch me out. There's a gap here, so I'm bound to fall down it at some point. Keep away from that. We are doing a series called Love Canterbury. Hey, brilliant. And we're talking about what it means to be a church that loves our city, that cares about our city, that is passionate about our city. And as Christians, we believe we have good news. That's what the gospel means. You may hear us talking about the gospel. The gospel actually means good news. And as Christians, we believe we have the best news in the world, and we want to share it with our city. So throughout this series, we're looking at various aspects of what it means to be people living in this city, loving our city. And today, the subject we're talking about is singleness. This is a little bit weird. I didn't choose to talk on this subject, okay? It was given to me, and little did I know when it was given to me that it would fall on the week of my first wedding anniversary. So, the last couple of weeks, Helen has been reminiscing about that joyful day when we got married. I've been reminiscing about before that when I was single, which has caused a little bit of friction in our relationship, but that's just one of the struggles I've gone through, to bless you this morning. It's not the only struggle, as we're about to see. I paid £3 for a DVD that I do not want in my collection, just to show you something today. We'll see that in a minute. So lots of struggles I've been through this week. But we don't often talk about singleness, I don't think. We very often talk about marriage, we talk about sex and kids and family and things like that. And I don't think we often talk enough about singleness. And we're going to look at a passage today in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And actually all around the bit we're going to look at, there are all sorts of questions about those other subjects, marriage and sex and sexuality and divorce and remarriage and things like that. And no doubt when we read through them, those thoughts will pop into your head and you think, I wonder if he's going to deal with that. Well, I'm not. I make no apologies for that. But I just want to focus today on what it means to be an unmarried person on a mission to love and change our city. That's my plan for this morning. I got a brilliant from the elders, so excellent. Hopefully we'll do a good job. But just before we do, I want to show you a clip from a film. Is it all ready to go? Excellent. You're going to love it. Hit the lights. Gosh. It's horrendous, isn't it? The clip, not the film. Well, the film is as well, but there you go. Don't you love friends like that? Hi, Bridge. Really just make you feel that small. It's just, frustrating. I watch that and I think, you know what? Actually, I wonder if sometimes some of us can come across like that. I hope not. And it made me check my heart and think, gosh, I wonder if I'm one of those smug married couples, as she said in her dreadful English accent. I think it is important that we all hear a talk on singleness, whether you're single or married today, for this very reason. All of us have at one stage in our life been single, okay? Hands up if you were born married. Luke Morrison, what are you doing getting engaged now? That's a little bit weird. There you go. We need to sort that out. Every one of us has been unmarried for at least 16 years of our lives, unless you've done something illegal. So it's an issue that we can all relate to. Many of us, tragically and sadly, will be single again at some stage of our life, either through death or divorce. It's not a pleasant thought, but actually it's true. And so we need to have a good theology of singleness. And as married couples, it's very easy to think, talking singleness is not for me. I'll just sit back and, play Tetris or catch up on sleep or something like that. But actually, I want to encourage you married couples to engage as much as single people today, because we can very often come across like those horrible people on the film if we're not careful. Not always intentionally, but there are certain things that married couples can do or say, or a particular way that they say it, that can make single people feel incredibly patronised. It is so easy to talk about singleness as if, that's just an issue for the youth and students or something like that. As if somehow you graduate and are instantly given a wife or something like that. But it's not a student-related issue all the time. I know students who are married, actually. They're in the minority. But more often you find there are people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond who are single. And actually, if we talk about singleness as, that's just something for the youth and the students, the people that go to Envision, actually it can be highly patronising. And we've got to guard ourselves against that, against making single people feel like they're lesser classes, lesser citizens, and like we don't really kind of care about them or value them. Also, I feel that married people can very often talk about marriage as if it's kind of the ultimate goal. Everyone should aim for marriage, and this period of singleness you kind of have to wade through, and it's a necessary evil before you get to the point where actually you're truly complete, and that's marriage. And we kind of perpetuate this lie, and I think lie is not too strong a word. We perpetuate this lie that you've got to struggle through singleness to get to this ultimate goal, and finally when you get there, everything will be fine. And I think what that does is actually, it makes marriage into an idol for many single people. It's very easy, and I know I fell into this when I was a single person, to think marriage, that's the ultimate goal. Until I get there, actually I'm kind of less than complete in some way. And so what people end up doing is pursuing marriage instead of pursuing God. In effect, they make marriage God. And that is a huge problem. And if you're single, I want you to guard your hearts against that. But if you're married today, we've got to guard ourselves against giving that impression and making people think, oh, I've got to get married. Otherwise, I'm somehow not as good as everyone else. So that is why I think everyone should listen to me today and not, go away or fall asleep or something like that. It's a bit of a problem when you have to justify why I think people should listen to me, but there we go. So we're going to read a passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. We're going to flick around a little bit. We'll look at 6 to 9 and then 25 to 38, and it will come up on the screen, hopefully, so you can follow it there. This is Paul writing to a church in a place called Corinth, and he says this: "Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this. I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of the other. To the unmarried and the widows, I say it is good for them to remain single as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Now, concerning the betrothed," we skip forward to verse 25, "concerning the betrothed, I have no command from the Lord, but I give my judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think that in view of this present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you do marry, you haven't sinned. And if a betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. Yet those who marry will have worldly troubles. And I would spare you that." Did I have here an amen from somewhere? It was a murmur of some sort. It was a Farnham amen. Okay. "Those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you that. This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none. Those who mourn as though they were not mourning. Those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing. And those who buy as though they had no goods. And those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of the world is passing away. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. If anyone thinks he is not behaving properly towards his betrothed, if his passions are strong, and it has to be, then let him do as he wishes. Let them marry, it is no sin. But whoever is firmly established in his heart, being under no necessity, but having his desire under control, and has determined this in his heart to keep her as his betrothed, he will do well. So then, he who marries his betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do even better." Did it really say that? He who marries does well, but he who refrains from marriage does even better. How many of you actually did double take for a moment and thought, surely he's doing that thing that preachers do where they say what's not really there to check if you're still paying attention? How many of you are actually shocked to see that Paul says marriage is good, but singleness it's not on a par, it's even better? Hands up, how many people find that shocking? Yeah. I found that shocking. The first time that verse ever really hit me, I thought, no, surely not. Surely, actually, marriage is good and singleness is sort of, it might be all right, but it's not quite as good as marriage. Surely marriage is the ultimate goal. But I tell you what, I really think we have been lied to. Our culture lies to us by telling us that marriage is the ultimate goal and singleness is some kind of necessary evil you have to get through. Actually, if we are people who believe the Bible, and I hope we are, we have to see that Paul says marriage is good, but singleness is even better. That's shocking enough to us, but actually the Jews at the time of Paul, they would have found it even more shocking. Let me just give you 2 quotes by 2 different rabbis. I'm certainly not endorsing them at all, but I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what people were thinking. Rabbi Hammer ben Hanina says, do you know him? He's quite a famous one. One of my favourite rabbis. Seriously, in the top trumps world of rabbis, I mean, he's a 10 straight through. He's great if you get him. Yeah. As soon as a man takes a wife, his sins are buried. So all the time you're single, you're sinful, you get married, and ta-da, white as snow. What? That is weird. I mean, that is not a biblical or Christian view of either singleness or marriage or forgiveness either. But they had this odd concept where they had such a high view of the importance of marriage and a low view of singleness that actually marriage almost just rights all the wrongs, wipes away your sin. How bizarre is that? Rabbi Eliezer says this, any man who has no wife is no proper man. That is weird. But actually, it wouldn't surprise me if we were honest, there's a tendency in our hearts to think like that as well. There's a stigma attached to singleness that the Jews identified there, and I think we feel today as well. I remember being a single person, and I know, having spoken to other single people, I wasn't alone in this, that I kind of felt almost there was a shame to being single. Everyone else was getting married and that was right, and I was kind of ashamed of being single. I used to think, what's wrong with me? I see all my friends starting to go out with people and getting engaged, and I was thinking, gosh, there's a pressure on me to do the same. This was in my late teens, early 20s. There is a kind of stigma attached to singleness, there appears to be. And we can feel the pressure, especially, to be honest, if you're that little bit older and you're looking around, doing the maths in your head and thinking, all the people my age are getting married, and actually that doesn't leave many options, and I'm going to struggle to find someone. And that's a serious pressure, a serious struggle. And actually it leads some people to leave the church or to go and try and find a wife or a husband outside the church in other places, and that can lead to all sorts of difficulties. So I want to say, let's reject that lie that marriage is actually the ultimate goal. Until you get there, you're not fully human. And let's accept the truth, and we're going to look at the truth. And I'm going to explain throughout the rest of the morning why Paul can say that singleness is better than marriage. But right now, I just want us to reject that lie that we've been told by our culture, maybe even by people in the church, and just our perceptions. Marriage is good, but singleness is better. I want to hear you say that. Marriage is good. Singleness is better. And I know in some of your hearts you're probably thinking, yeah, I know that's a theory, but secretly we all know marriage is really better. No, so we're going to say it again. Marriage is good. Singleness is better. Helen's looking terrified. I'm going to move on quickly. We're going to look at what Paul has to say. Look, verse 7, he says this, I wish all were as I am, single. He says both marriage and singleness are gifts. We tend to think of singleness as a curse. Actually, the word is grace gift. It's a gracious gift of God to us, singleness. And we treat it like a curse. How messed up is that we treat the gift of God like a curse? He says it's good, verse 8, verse 26, verse 32, he says it leaves you free from anxieties. Verse 35, it says it secures your undivided devotion to the Lord. And of course, verse 38, he who marries does well, he who remains single does even better. So let's see why Paul says that. And all I can say, Hugh, Ollie, Luke, guys who've got engaged recently, I hope you've kept the receipts, because that's a joke. For the rings, not the girls. I'm kidding. Keep it. I thought I'd, throw in a joke, keep it light, now you all hate me. So that backfired, but there we go. Let's move on quickly. Verse 26, okay. Paul says, in view of the present distress. Now, I'm experiencing a present distress right now, but what is the present distress that Paul is talking about? Well, if you read through 1 Corinthians, you might be tempted to think it's something he's already touched on in the book. So in previous chapters, he's talked about all sorts of sexual immorality, people sleeping with prostitutes, incest in the church, lawsuits where people are just suing other church members, all sorts of stuff like that. Later on, you get to chapter 11, he says, he talks about people who are getting sick and dying, so that might all contribute to the present distress, but actually actually, I think it's a bit wider than that. Because Paul doesn't say, in view of the present distress, I think all of you, just you Corinthians, don't worry about everybody, just you, until it blows over, I think you should stay single. He doesn't say that. Verse 7, he says, I wish all were as I am. So for Paul, it seems to be a general principle. He seems to think, actually, it would be better for anyone back then and even now to remain single. But you might think, okay, well, what do you mean, present distress? Could you explain, Paul? And he obliges. Verse 29, this is what I mean, brothers. Almost as if saying, yeah, thank you for asking. This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. And then in verse 31, he backs it up by saying, for the present form of this world is passing away. Paul is very conscious of being in this stage here with, on his left, just behind him historically, is the resurrection of Jesus, the death, the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus. And on his right, a little bit further away, he doesn't know how far away, but on his right in the future is the coming time when Jesus will come back and judge this world and recreate the world so there's a perfect new heavens and new earth, and everyone that has believed in him and followed him will live for eternity with God. So he's in the middle thinking, here I've got the resurrection of Jesus, up there I've got the second coming of Jesus when everything will be made perfect. Here I am in the middle with these worldly troubles, and he's looking up there and saying, I don't know how long it's going to take until we get Jesus coming back, but as far as I know, the time is short. And actually this world is passing away. And so if I say to you singleness is better than marriage, and you think I don't understand, you might go through all kind of trying to grapple with it in your head. But actually he wants you to think singleness is better than marriage in this context, okay? Here he is, resurrection of Jesus one side, the return of Jesus, the new heavens and new earth, eternity spent with God on the other side. And he's saying all this here is passing away. It's all going. And there's going to be a new perfect world. And so, in a sense, he is saying it is thoroughly appropriate to live now as if you didn't have these worldly troubles, because they're transient. They will be gone soon, and you'll be in eternity with God. In a sense, you and I have to qualify this, so don't leap to conclusions with what I'm saying, but in a sense, you and I now have a duty to live as if we didn't have worldly commitments, because this world is passing away and a new one is being ushered in. Now, we have to be clear what that means and what that doesn't mean. He doesn't mean it literally. He doesn't mean, when he says in that verse, those who have wives live as if they had none. He doesn't mean literally you get rid of your wife, okay? He's using shocking language to surprise us and make us think, gosh, I had never seen marriage and singleness in that light before. And so he uses deliberately provocative language to get us thinking that. You cannot say, I want to pursue the things of God. I want to live for eternity. So wife, I've been with you for a while, but now you're slowing me down. Off you go. I'm off by myself. We laugh, but actually I've known people that have done that. I've known at least one man who has said, I feel called to go this way and my wife doesn't fit, so we're separating. Paul, he'd kick a man like that. Seriously, he would not be happy with that. That's not what Paul is saying at all. Remember, it's the same Paul that is writing 1 Corinthians 7 as also wrote Ephesians 5. And in Ephesians 5, he says that marriage is a profound mystery, and it talks about the relationship between Jesus and his church. And Jesus doesn't get married to the church and they go, actually, I've got work to do. I'm done with you. Jesus is utterly, thoroughly committed to his church, and so must we be as well. Committed to our wives or to our husbands. He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. He doesn't say, husbands, love your wives until you find out they're slowing you down. You could do better without them. Paul says singleness is better, so just kind of go and do what you want. He doesn't say that. There is a commitment to marriage that we have to honor. He's very serious about that, and I want to nail that. Obviously, Paul has things to say about divorce and remarriage and all that sort of stuff. And we don't have time to look at that this morning, and it's not really sort of in my remit. So, I don't know, maybe we'll think about that another time. But we're going to lay that aside and think for the moment, what Paul is saying is this. One day, all of this world and all the evil and all the things that are wrong in this world will be done away. All the evil things like war and knife crime and Manchester United and all sorts of things like that. I'm deadly serious. Come on, if you need any more proof they're evil, they've got a devil in their logo. They're evil, okay? And they're going to be gone one day. Praise the Lord. And the Premiership and the world will be a much better place. All these things will be gone. But I tell you what, even things that are not evil but still cause anxiety, like Arsenal, being an Arsenal supporter at the moment is causing me anxiety. Even that will pass away, even though it's not as evil, And mortgages, and actually raising kids, and marriage. They're not evil things, but one day they will pass away as well in favour of this new and perfect world. And Paul wants us to be so caught up, so enraptured with that future hope and the fact that time is short and we've got a mission to do before Jesus comes again, to love and cherish and change this city. He wants us to be so caught up with that future that actually these things don't cause us anxiety and bog us down. He doesn't say just get rid of them entirely, but he said be so focused on that future that these things just appear transient, momentary light troubles. Helen, would you mind? Not that Helen's a momentary light trouble. That's not the link. Do you come up? You have a spillage. Oh, no. Thank you, Joe. This is my lovely wife, Helen. Hey. Was that a, well done, Liam, how on earth did you get a lovely wife like this? Or was that, I don't know. She's great, and she doesn't like holding my hand in public, but hey, it's for an illustration, so, just this once. As a married person, this is my wife, I have to keep one eye on the future, one eye on the same eye, I have loads of eyes, one eye on the... one eye on the future, the purposes of God, the mission we're called to, the wonderful, glorious inheritance. I have to keep one eye on those and one eye on my wife, okay? And she's got to do the same. I can't just go, sorry, darling, I'm just going to focus entirely on that because I've made a commitment to her in marriage. Smile. I've made a commitment to her in marriage, and I'm going to honour that because Paul tells me to in Ephesians 5. I keep one eye on the future, one eye on her. And as we are moving together, and she's doing the same to me as well. So wives, just because I talk about husbands a lot, it's just because I'm a bloke. So don't think I'm forgetting you. You actually have a duty to keep one eye on the future and one eye on us as well. Yes, moving towards this future goal, I had to keep looking forward and then keep going, Helen, are you still with me? Are we still moving together? Are you okay? I don't want it to be too hard for you. I want to help you to overcome. I want to help you, leading you towards God's future. Give her a round of applause. She can go back. Can I have another person to play my wife? No. I've got to keep one eye on the future and one eye on my wife. I have a duty to lead her together. We move forward together, but actually, as we're going like this and I'm stopping and saying, are you okay? I'm going to be moving relatively slowly, one step at a time. If I were single, I wouldn't have to look back over my shoulder. I could just go, wow, the purposes of God. I could walk at double the speed that I am walking with my wife. And that's what Paul is talking about. If you are focused on the mission, focused on the future, actually he says the married man's mind is divided between God's purposes and his wife. And that's not wrong, it's just the way it is. And it's okay. In verse 32, he says this, I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord. Just that. He's focused on that. Obviously, you have other anxieties as well. I'm not downplaying the other areas of your life. But in terms of marriage and singleness, you can be focused on God. The married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided between the two. The unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit, but the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband, as well as obviously being on the mission. If I felt called to move abroad and plant a church, this isn't just a prophecy that's coming to me in the moment. If I did feel called to move abroad and plant a church in a foreign nation, and Helen didn't, I'd struggle. I wouldn't be justified in saying, well, fine, I'm going. You stay behind. Don't care anymore. I wouldn't be justified in saying that, but I would have to discuss it. It would take time. We'd have to wrestle, and one of us would probably get our way and one of us wouldn't, and you'd ask for God to change your hearts and to knit you together and so you could move together on mission. But it's a process, and it would mean that I couldn't just up sticks and go as soon as I felt God call me. But a single person could. Obviously they have other ties, work commitments and family, and I'm not saying it's easy and you're just totally emotionally detached from everything, but there is a sense in which you don't have a covenant commitment to weigh up as well. If you hear the call of God, you can go. Does that make sense? That is why some of the most successful missionaries that have ever lived over the last few centuries have been single people. Not because God prefers using single people to married people, but actually they are able to say, I've heard the call of God, I am going. and go solidly. People like Amy Carmichael, Lottie Moon. If you're a single person and you're struggling, I encourage you to read books like that, books that tell the stories of faithful single people who have said, actually, I had the opportunity. Many of them had the opportunity to get married, but before that came up, they had heard the call of God and they said, okay, I'm going. Are you going to come with me? And the other person said, no, I'm not interested. And so they said, okay, well, I've heard the call of God. I can't marry you. And off they've gone. They've gone as single people. Okay, they're not already married and then they split and they go off. That would ruin my point. But you see, very often, God uses single people before they get married for great purposes, achieving awesome purposes that married couples simply would struggle to do. And practically speaking, if you look around our church, I think you'd be surprised how many single people are the regular, diligent servers in our church. That's not to say that married people aren't serving, okay? So all throughout the talk, I'm so aware you could read things into what I'm saying and not saying. Don't. Okay, don't read between the lines. Obviously, I value and I honour the married people and the people with children who serve so diligently. But actually, if you think about it, some of the key servers in our church and ministry leaders are single people. And the reason is because they have more time, more flexibility of time. I think that's the key one. And they don't have to deal with the struggles of date night and how you work on your marriage and all those sorts of things that sap time. Actually, I was just thinking of some examples. Some of the best cell groups in our church, you may not know this. I won't tell you who they are because I'm sure they're very humble people. But some of the best cell groups in our church are run by single people who don't just meet on the night they have cell, but every week regularly meet on another night to pray for their cell group. Now, me, as a married person, I struggle enough to go to my cell group every week without feeling guilty for having not spent time with my wife, just us. But single people, these are single people using their singleness well, committing to mission. I heard stories about single people who have gone to married couples who are struggling with their time and said, can I do your ironing for you? Can I look after your babies for you? Can I help you in any way? Can I cook for you? That is people using their singleness well. And that is what I want to encourage you to do today. Obviously, I'm not telling married people, now you can be lazy because I've just encouraged all the single people to do all your work for you. Obviously not. I honour the married people and the parents who are serving well. But single people, there is so much potential for you to serve brilliantly in ways that us married guys would struggle. Imagine being married to the Apostle Paul. Okay. Probably not a match made in heaven, really. Okay, you've got this wife and Paul, and he wasn't married, and he goes, I'm off to work, and he wanders away for a bit, off to plant the church or something. He gets shipwrecked, beaten, whipped, stoned, put in prison. You don't know when he's coming home. Eventually he gets released. He comes back and he goes, but I planted a church. And you say, well, you know, your dinner's been on the table for 2 years. Imagine the distress it would cause his wife. Actually, the dinner issue, okay? When I'm preparing for a sermon, I just have to totally focus like that. And we usually share the cooking in our home. I do a lot of it, but Helen will serve me when I'm working away. She'll do the cooking or something, so I've got time to focus, and then she'll get a bit stressed if I turn up like 2 or 3 minutes late because I'm still tapping away thinking, oh, that's a great point, a great illustration. I could show Bridget Jones at this bit. You know, imagine the arguments over dinners going cold as Paul's going, hey, I'm just on chapter 9 of Romans. This is a tricky one, okay? He's ploughing away, writing these massive letters that are far more complex than anything I've ever come up with. Being married to Paul would not be ideal. And actually, I think that the effectiveness of Paul's ministry is due in part, in fact, in large part, to the fact that he had no worldly ties. He had no wife. He had no children. He had no mortgage. He had a portable tent-making business that he could take and use in various places. And that freed him up to see the world changed for the gospel. And single people, that could be you. That could be you. That could be your story as well. If you learn to see singleness as Paul saw singleness, you could see the world changed for God. Now, I don't regret getting married at all. I love my marriage. I'm enjoying my marriage. 1 year in, and it's great. And we're still serving, and we're still loving serving, and it's brilliant. But there are certain things that I don't have the time to be able to do. That actually, if you saw singleness like Paul did, you would be able to commit to, and you will actually be able to see far more. And this is humbling for a married person to say, but you will be able to see far more done for the kingdom than I ever will. It almost makes me jealous. If you see your singleness in the way that Paul did, you may see more people come to Christ, more churches planted, more orphanages set up, more total lives and countries and continents changed than I ever will. That's not to say I won't ever see some of those things, but actually you have the potential to see so much more done for the kingdom than I do. And I know that when I was single, I wasted my singleness in many ways. I did. I mean, I still served in the church. I was still stuck in. But if I could go back, I would love to have a better theology of singleness. I wish I had a better theology of singleness back when I was single. I would have done so many different things. Maybe I would have gone and joined a church plant, or gone on a mission trip, or just committed more to cell group, or got involved with our debt advice centre, all these things that I struggle to find time to do now. I wasted my singleness because I spent my whole time pursuing someone to marry rather than pursuing God. And if I went back, I would be very careful not to make marriage become an idol. And I know it's painful. Singleness is painful. I don't want to belittle your pain at all. If there are people here who are emotionally scarred and suffering and struggling from singleness, I don't want to pretend like it's all easy, okay? It totally isn't. But I do believe that if you can see singleness as Paul saw singleness, you will be so effective. I want to see you caught up with the passion and vision to change this city first of all, but then the nation and the nations. And I, as a married person, want to stand here today and say I'm looking forward to seeing how far you run. I'm still running, okay? I'm probably running faster than some of you currently actually in doing things, but I know that if you can get a good view, a good theology of singleness, you are going to bomb it down this track. You are going to be running so fast for God, seeing so much change. I'm excited to see how much you achieve for the gospel. I'm sure all the married people here would echo that as well. He who marries does well. He who remains single does even better. Let me just say a quick word about marriage, though. I don't want you to feel like I'm being negative about marriage at all. I think the tendency actually when you preach on marriage is for single people to feel lonely, and when you preach on singleness is to make married people feel guilty. I don't want to do that. Actually, don't be guilty for being married. That's a gift. It says in verse 7 of this passage, it's a gift as much as singleness is. Andrew Wilson, a guy from Eastbourne, he gives this example. I think it's just perfect. I tried to think of one that was slightly tweaked so I could say, hey, I made it up myself, but I couldn't. So I'll give the credit to him. He says he went on a stag party once. That's not the end of the story. I was just taking a drink. He went on a stag party once when they climbed Mount Snowdon. He said he was with some guys and the best man was lagging behind the whole way. And he couldn't understand why, because this guy was really fit, really active, and he couldn't understand why he wasn't leading the charge. When they got to the top of the mountain, it turned out that in his rucksack, he'd been carrying a bottle of champagne so that when they got to the top, they could celebrate. That's a great story. He says this. It was great fun, it made the summit a lot more enjoyable, but if his only objective had been climbing the mountain, it would have been a silly thing to bring because it slowed him down. If he had been single-minded, the champagne would have been thrown out of the rucksack and he would have gone for the summit with all his strength. For some, marriage is like the champagne. It's great, it's good fun, it might be exactly what you would choose if you had no other sort of clear purpose and calling, but when you are given a call of God to go for the summit, it needs to be cast aside in favour of the mission you've been given. Paul thinks exactly like this, Andrew says, about having an undivided devotion for the Lord. Marriage is good, but pursuing the purposes of God in a focused way because the time is short is better. I think what I like about that illustration is he hits the nail on the head. He does both. He affirms that marriage is good, but actually it will slow you down. And so in a sense, singleness is better. Now, he's obviously not saying that halfway up the mountain you should go, oh, just slow me down, I chuck the champagne out of the... He's not saying get rid of your marriage. He's saying, actually, if you feel a call of God to be effective, don't put the champagne in the rucksack in the first place. And there'll be many people here, actually, who have a call of God in their lives. Maybe it's to go to another nation. Maybe it's to stay here and be very effective. And actually, putting the champagne in the rucksack would slow you down. And so it may be that actually God is asking you at the moment, run without the champagne. Maybe the champagne will come later. But for the time being, focus on the summit, not the champagne that you don't yet have. Don't make the champagne an idol. Don't make marriage your God. Does that make sense? Just one more dimension I want to look at before we come back to worship. And it's this. In the Old Testament, how did you become a part of the people of God in the Old Testament? You were born into it. Excellent. You were born into the people of God. Jews had babies and they were baby Jews, and so they were people of God. Yeah? So if you wanted to expand the people of God, how would you do it? Have more babies. Yes. So that is exactly why God says to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Excellent. He then gets to Abraham. He says, your offspring are going to be more numerous than the stars. Yes. He said, you're going to have a big family. Not that Abraham was going to have more children than the stars, but actually his children's children would have more children than the stars. And actually the people of God would spread and spread and spread. And the way it was done was through giving birth to children. So, in the Old Testament, if you wanted to have a legacy, what you would do is get married, have lots of sex, have lots of kids, and expand the people of God. Okay? How's that for an evangelism strategy? Sounds kind of fun, but kind of a bit, stressful as well. But there we go. So that's how it was in the Old Testament. Now, this raises the question for me, if having children is so important, physical, literal children, then how can Paul say singleness is better than marriage? That's a difficult one, isn't it? If having children is so important, how can singleness be better than marriage? Paul never had a physical child. Did he screw up? Did he miss the point? No. Actually, there comes this turning point in Isaiah chapters 53 to 56. And this is complex, okay? So try and stay with me. I'll try and make it clear. But it's difficult. In Isaiah 53, he is prophesying. It means that God is speaking to him about something that is coming in the future. And he's actually talking about Jesus, who didn't come for hundreds of years. He didn't know anything about Jesus. But inspired by God, Isaiah is talking about this guy who's coming. And Isaiah 53 says that this man, Jesus, will die a death on behalf of people who have disobeyed God. The Bible uses a technical term called sin. And it means disobeying God and therefore being shut out of a relationship with God and being deserving of judgment. And in Isaiah 53, Isaiah is talking about the fact that Jesus is going to come and take the punishment in his death on the cross so that we don't have to be punished, so that we can be forgiven from our sins. Okay? And then the very next chapter, chapter 54, verse 1, says this. The children of the desolate one or the barren one will be more, say more than the children of her who is married. Okay, biologists, can you get your head around that? Okay, the desolate, barren person is going to have more children than the person that actually can have children. It's a little bit weird, a little bit cryptic. Move on. Chapter 56 says this, verse 4, to the eunuchs, they couldn't have children either, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better, say better, than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. So what we get, okay, this is weird, but stick with me. We get three things. We get, first of all, this talking about a guy who is going to come and die so that his death could achieve forgiveness for you. And then we get two prophecies about people that can't have children suddenly having more children than people that can have children. Does that strike anyone as a little bit odd? It probably struck them as a little bit odd, and the answer to this riddle didn't come for hundreds of years, but it came when Jesus came to earth, and he sat there debating with a rabbi, a pretty high-up rabbi in the top trumps table, a guy called Nicodemus, in John 3, sitting there chatting to him, and he says, you know what? If you want to be a part of the people of God, if you want to see the kingdom of God, you have to be born again. And Nicodemus goes, I'm an old man, probably a bit fat. How am I going to get inside my mum's womb? Isn't that a bit weird? And Jesus says, no. There's a new sort of spiritual birthing process that you have to go through if you want to be a part of the children of God. In the Old Testament, if you want to be a part of the children of God, you had to be born in. And so people would have lots and lots of physical children, and that's what mattered. In the New Testament, if you wanted to be part of the people of God, you had to go through a spiritual birthing process, which means that actually it's that new spiritual birth that matters more than physical, literal birth. Does that make sense? It's a big, big mind shift. But it means this. if I share the gospel, that is the good news of Jesus, if I share that with someone, I say, look, here's the story. We've all sinned. We've all disobeyed God. None of us can have a relationship with God of our own merit, okay? But Jesus came and died a death, taking the punishment that you and I deserved upon himself on the cross so that we could be forgiven. He was buried. He rose again from the dead, physically, literally, not a metaphor. He literally rose again from the dead and ascended into heaven. And now if you believe in him, turn away from your old life, follow him, be baptized as a symbol of that kind of crossing over and following this leader and this new birth. If you do that, you can go through this spiritual birthing process where you become a child of God. Do you want to respond now? Let's pray for them. If I preach like that and someone responds, they become a child of God, what does that make me? It makes me a father to them. I haven't ever given birth to a physical child, but I've seen people saved. I've seen people become children of God. That makes me a father to them. Or if Claire preaches to someone, that makes her a mother to them. And fatherhood and motherhood is not just about popping out a kid, okay, and then, hey, I'm now a father or a mother, or whatever. Actually, it's about raising a child as well. It's about giving birth to a child and then developing them, helping them to grow. And what God calls us to do now is make disciples by bringing them into a new birth and raising them up, encouraging them to grow as Christians, to become mature Christians. And actually, it says when we do that, we become like fathers or mothers to them. Now, that's complex, but do you kind of get what I'm saying? So what this means for the single person is you could be a father or mother to dozens or hundreds or thousands or even millions of people without ever giving birth to a single physical child. Think about that. That is mind-blowing. And this isn't just some random thing I've just made up to, confuse you all at the end of a talk. Actually, it seems to be how Paul views his own ministry. So in 1 Corinthians 4, he says, I became your father in Christ Jesus through the gospel. He preached the gospel. People respond. They become children of God. They grow up. And Paul is nurturing them, and he sees himself as a father to them. Did he give birth to any of them? No. He says in 1 Thessalonians 2, I was to you like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. Was he a mother to any of them? Physically, literally, no. But he saw them become children of God and he raised them up. In the Old Testament, having physical, literal children was the goal. Now, is how many disciples can you make? How many people can you turn from hating God to loving God and pursuing him with everything? That's what's important. Now, I'm not downplaying parenting, actual parenting, okay? And even I was so encouraged this morning. We were praying beforehand, and Roger encouraged us to pray for our parents in the church and our children in the church. And obviously, our goal as Christians is to parent well, to raise our children well, to raise them to know God as well. But if that was your sole evangelistic strategy, I have to say it would be pretty useless, okay? Imagine this. You try and have a baby, 9-month process while it's growing. It comes out, you can't convert it straight away because it doesn't know what the heck you're talking about. So you've got to wait maybe till, 8, 9, 10, something like that. And then you can be sharing the gospel with them constantly, diligently over those years. And maybe about 8 years old or something, they might give their lives to Christ. Congratulations, that is brilliant. Really brilliant. But it's taken you 9 years or something to get one convert. Meanwhile, a single person or a married person committed diligently to sharing the gospel with their friends, to church planting, to inviting people to Alpha, can see dozens and dozens of new people of God, new children of God, in the space of me developing one. See how the maths works. God wants people who are thoroughly committed to parenting, yes, absolutely, but also committed to running hard after the purposes of God. And that's the challenge I want to leave you with today. Are you running hard after the purposes of God? Marriage is good, having children is good, raising them well is good, doing all those things and still serving in the church is great, and I want to honor you people who do that. But actually, single people, you've got a great opportunity if you really grasp it. I want you to get fired up about that, excited about that. You can change the world. You really can. It won't be easy, absolutely not. And there are certain perks that marriage brings. You have someone to comfort you, someone to stand with you. But actually, single people, we want to stand with you. I don't want to be a smug married couple with my wife. Obviously, I'm not going to be a couple at all. But I don't want to be a smug married person who makes you feel like a second-rate citizen. I want to stand with you. I want to help you to run hard after the purposes of God. Many of us married people here will disciple and befriend single people. And we've got to help them run after the purposes of God with an intensity that we will actually struggle to keep up with ourselves. Is that an exciting view of singleness? Is that a releasing view of singleness? Not a depressing one. I wish I'd known that years ago. I really do. We're going to get the band to come back up. That's okay. I just want you to repeat that phrase one more time. Marriage is good. Singleness is better. Do you see why it's better? Let me just read this. Read this final bit. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. He who marries his betrothed does well. He who refrains from marriage will do even better. We're going to return to worship. We're going to worship God. I'm sure, there's so much for you to mull over. I'm just aware that I've blasted you with information for quite a long time. So I don't expect you all to compute it right now. And actually, some people will have physical and emotional issues that they need to work through. But as we're worshiping, there may be a few ways that you want to respond. And we'll have a ministry team who are quickly and hurriedly sticking on their red T-shirts. And they would love to pray for you. So maybe you know in your heart and you felt convicted of the fact that you have made marriage an idol. If so, I encourage you to repent. Say, God, I'm not going to accept that lie anymore. I'm going to, even though it's difficult and painful, I'm going to joyfully accept the truth that marriage is good, but singleness is better. And it is your gift to me. I've treated it like a curse. It's your gift to me. And you may need to come and get someone to pray for you. Maybe someone you trust, okay, and someone you know and has your best interests at heart. Get them to pray with you as well, but come and see the ministry team. Maybe there are people here that are hurting and struggling and have been emotionally scarred from their singleness. Possibly even single mothers, single parents, people that are older and really struggling and finding it hard, and they are hurt, and maybe they've been hurt by smug married couples as well. Come and get prayed for. Maybe there are married people who actually look at single people and get jealous of them. They think they're doing stuff that I wish I could do, but I'm tied down with a wife who just is running slow and I'm fed up with it. I could do so much more if I didn't have this wife. Maybe there are some people that are bitter about their marriages. I've met people like that. I know people like that. If that's you, I encourage you to come and get prayed for as well. Pray that God would help you to strengthen your marriage and that you will be able to run together, hand in hand, at the same pace after God. It's not an option just to go, I'm going after God, leave you to your own way. Pursue God together and come and get prayer for that. Maybe there are people here as well who are not Christians at all, and this could well have been the weirdest talk you've ever heard in your life. Sorry. But hey, I'd love to chat with you if you have questions. Come this evening. I'm going to be talking again on a slightly different issue, so not exactly about singleness, but we may be able to touch on things that challenge you. But if you want to become a child of God, maybe actually when I was explaining about that birthing process, you thought, actually, I am aware that I've displeased God. I am aware that I'm not really in a relationship with God, and you'd like to become a child of God. All you have to do is come forward and see one of the ministry team. They will talk with you, pray with you, explain what happens, and hopefully we can make one or two fathers or mothers up the front here today of new spiritual children.